All right, guys, how y'all doing? We just got through watching the new Game of Thrones House of Dragons, along with most people out there in the world. I assume at least this is going to be probably one of the most first watched episodes, and we're going to see how people like kind of liked it or whatnot through it. Hope you guys in the chat be free to like comment on anything. This will be like spoilers. We're obviously going to be talking about the episode, so things are going to come out. We're going to be talking about our favorite characters or what we liked or disliked about the episode and everything else. So feel free if you're in the comments right now, even if you're watching this later on and you want to drop a comment about what you thought, go ahead, join in on the conversation and everything else. We'll be pulling up comments. This is going to be me, Caleb, and whoever on our team wants to join in and talk about these episodes, as well as like talking to you guys in the chat and everything else. Putting that all together. I do have alerts on. If you want to throw out a Streamlab or whatever, it will come on. So we'll be able to see that if you want to, and put in your thoughts there as well if you want to help support the channel a little bit. So, man, we just got through watching first episode, House of Dragons. Coming back to the Game of Thrones world after like a few years, they finally got one of these, like, I guess, prequel style things that they were talking about doing. They've got it actually done. It's filmed. We get the first episode today. Caleb, what was your overall thoughts, man, whenever you was able to see the first episode of House of Dragons?
Oh man, I was excited all day, getting ready to watch this, man. I couldn't wait for this to come on, man. I love this whole Game of Thrones world. So I was hyped going into it, and I mean, it didn't disappoint to me, man. I really liked the episode overall. Obviously we're gonna get big stunning things going on in the first episode. We're just kind of getting reintroduced to everything and reintroduced some families and the world that's going on and where we at in this story. So as far as all that stuff goes, man, I think they did a good job there, trying to get you refamiliarized with Game of Thrones and getting you back into the show and getting you in that mode. And yeah, but a lot of the actors in it, for at least for this episode, I think they did a really good job. And yeah, I mean, it's great to be back in this whole Game of Thrones world, man.
Yeah, I could hear the excitement in your voice there, but like, there is, it is a reintroduction into the world and everything else. Now, I will say there would have been kind of like a cool thing if they would have actually went to like some of the different places. They did kind of stick in King's Landing for the whole time here, except for the one scene towards the very end where you see the king's brother like getting on his dragon. He's obviously from the Vale, but you really didn't get to see that land. You just got to see him be with his dragon and fly off with his dragon. So you're wondering, what the hell is he going to do? Is he just going on a joyride with that dragon? Or is he going to do something else with that dragon? We don't know, because he's kind of upset about what just happened between him and his brother in the episode. But like, yeah, man, like I liked it. I hope the beginning part, like I was kind of I loved how Game of Thrones always opened, right? And this is the first episode, so maybe it's going to be different. And because maybe they only stayed in one place, they didn't want to start it. But I was kind of hoping they didn't want to show you all the places they might go. Yeah, so I as far as the opening credits, you know what I'm saying? Like where in Game of Thrones, they had like one of the coolest opening credits I'd ever seen in any kind of show, period. And I was hoping they would do something sort of similar with this show as well, just because to me that was so iconic. But like I said, first episode, they started with like a cold open. They told you a little bit about the history, about where we were going into this first episode. So maybe that's going to be different going forward. So we'll find out on the next episode, on episode 2 next week. But yeah, man, like I agree with you. I didn't see any flaws in any of the actors so far. So it seems like they put together a good cast here. Some of them I recognized, some of them I didn't. Like I said, it would have been cool, and I know we're going to eventually do it, but it would have been cool to see, like, say, the North, for instance, for like a few minutes, the Sea Winterfell, like at this time. And I know we're going to get that eventually. We're going to get those places, those iconic places and stuff as the show goes on. But in this episode, it was contained into that one thing, but I'm fine with that. And we got to remember when, you said something about this, the first episode, not going to be anything super great and just like mind blowing in the first episode. You go back to the original Game of Thrones, and some people, if the show wouldn't have been as great as it was as it moved forward, some people would have said that was a boring episode of television, to be honest with you. They had like the one.
Well, you do get the last cliffhanger where, Jaime pushes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's pretty much like,
ran out the window. That was the
if you take that 1 minute scene out, not even that long, like, but like, you know, take that one scene out of that happening. Like some people would say, like, oh, the first episode, no, whatever, it's not that. But I actually say this episode had more action in it, had a little bit more
Yeah,
stuff going
yeah,
on,
did
more
definitely.
intrigue. Really like the tournament. Like we had fun when we were watching it. We was all watching it in the Discord together for the LGR Discord, and like there was about 7, 8, 9, 10 of us that was watching it tonight together, and we all got amped up during the tournament, during different scenes and stuff like that. But like I said, it's kind of a review of the episode. We were told at the very beginning of the episode that basically we're 172 years before Daenerys was either born. Yeah, I think it was born. So we're 172 years before that.
Yeah.
And we have an issue where there's going to be a problem with the heir. The king, instead of like letting war break out, basically, he decides to choose an heir between two people, and he let a lot of people in on this big council that they did to kind of help decide that. And we ended up getting King Viserys. He ended up being Viserys. He ended up being like the actual king that was chosen, and then that's when we start the show. Is some of the stuff that he was doing.
That's why I think it's going to be a little different. Maybe not, you know, jumping from here to there like the original Game of Thrones. You know, going from character to character and place to place. All that might jump around in time wise, more so than you know, geography wise. You know, going from, because they did skip some time. You know, they go showing you how he became king from Jaehaerys, the whole king, and then to where he's going to name his heir. It's a little bit of a time gap, and that might be how it is going forward, rather than, you know, going place to place. Because it was all that was the different feel from Game of Thrones, just being in one place and one main storyline throughout. Because that's pretty much how the book is written. That this come from. It's written like a history book. You know, it's not written from a first person novel. You know, it's written like this happened, that happened, and it's getting like a third person telling of events that occurred. And I think that's why they chose to go this way, showing that, you know, going from, okay, this where he became king, and this is out where your name is there, going in timeline wise.
Yeah, so like it basically, because like you're actually reading in the process of finishing up the book that's about like some of this stuff that this is going to be based on. So what I think they did was pick a certain time, pick that era, pick that king, maybe some surrounding events that was happening to it, and they're going to grow upon that, obviously, with the seasons as they grow. Because like you said, it's not like a retelling of every detail that happened. It's not like retelling each individual's almost biography like the Game of Thrones was. You know, like it had a different point of views and everything else that you follow in the books, and you kind of did that when you watched the show as well. So in this show right here, I think they're going to have a lot more freedom to work with, because there's only going to be certain details that are told. Like the main key points are going to have to stay the same, obviously, because it's part of the history. Yeah. But besides that, they're going to have a little bit of freedom about how they build up, how you get to certain points.
And that's another thing. They have to come up with a lot of the dialogue, because I mean, there is some dialogue in the book, but a lot of the dialogue they basically have to make up themselves. Unlike the, you know, in Game of Thrones books, you know, they pretty much had conversations, but you don't really get a lot of those conversations in the book that they in Fire and Blood. It's more just, you know, straight up like this will happen, not what happened, instead of, you know, people having conversations with each other. So the creators of the show, at least writers of the show, have to, you know, come up with all that dialogue on, okay, this is what took place and this is what they were saying and all that. So that that might be a lot different from what happened in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, so this is kind of like sitting back, which I give them props. So far in this first episode, it felt like Game of Thrones. Like there was not a point in this first episode that I was like, oh, this is totally different. This is totally off base. This isn't good or any of that. The dialogue felt like a Game of Thrones. The way people talk to people and handle things felt like Game of Thrones. The scenery obviously felt like Game of Thrones. Felt like it was a little bit, and it felt newer, right? Like, so the King's Landing, you know, it looks newer. It looks better. It doesn't look as beat up, you know, especially like where the king and queen and stuff like that would hang was always kind of like glorious looking and stuff, even in the first Game of Thrones. But like the surrounding areas of the King's Landing and stuff like that, like of the actual castle and keep, like that right there looked kind of trashy and like the Game of Thrones that we were used to. but it looked like in this one, it looked a lot cleaner. It looked like people were living in a different way. It looks like, well, they probably had, and one of the big things is like they had peace for a while and stuff like that. Things weren't as chaotic. So that's another thing that may play into it. But like I said, watching the episode, I felt like I was watching Game of Thrones. I did not feel like that this was anything too different, you know what I'm saying, to like cause any kind of alarm.
That's another thing. I think the way they shot it, they kind of perfected it, because obviously I think it grew as Game of Thrones went on from season 1 to how it ended. Like, I think they got more cinematic in the way they shot things, and I think they definitely perfected in this episode of way, you know, how the dragon was flying through the air. Obviously, they got that from like towards the end of the Game of Thrones, where you know, saw more of the big dragons, and I think they really did, you know, upgraded from how, you know, from the first episode of Game of Thrones to the first episode of House of Dragon, and just the way they shoot everything, and a lot of the action parts with the tournament. The action was really shot really well and looked really cool. And I think they learned, you know, from what they did in Game of Thrones, and, you know, kind of upgraded from there.
No, yeah, like one of the things that I talked about during the actual, like, so we had a tournament during this thing, and well, during this tournament, like one of the things I thought was cool, we saw speed jousting. I said it multiple times during the thing. Like, I thought that was actually pretty cool. There wasn't no, you would do your joust and then you go back to the end and you kind of sit and wait and everything else. And there's like some time pass and then you come at each other again. They would go through, hit each other. If both of them were still up, they would grab the next joust out of their squire's hand and like start running towards the next one immediately. I thought that was pretty cool, a pretty cool way to do things. You see in a joust and a little bit of a different like take. Like you said, though, and then there was like a little battle scene where people were pissed and everything and whatnot. So they were like going at each other pretty hardcore. There were some things, heads being bashed in. One guy got dragged off the field, but part of his cheek fell off and stayed on the field. So those kind of things like that was going on and happening, which really still is another Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones has always been a brutal show, like, and this showed some of that brutality. Yeah. I will say one of the things that I've kind of enjoyed, like I didn't, it's not something you take away a little bit like from Game of Thrones in most cases. Like there were times in the original Game of Thrones, say like with Ned Stark and, you know, Catelyn and everything else, like that you saw the man and the wife have actual love for each other and really be behind and stick behind each other. You didn't see that very often, though, besides like those one or two little examples you could pull from the old Game of Thrones when it came to people and like husband and wife. I actually feel like they had a little bit of a difference here. The king actually loved his wife. Like he was trying to make decisions. Like even though there's a decision on here where he has to make a decision between the wife and the baby, I felt like it was actually a genuine decision made. He wasn't just throwing his wife's life away. You know what I'm saying? Like he actually took some time to think about it and everything else. And he made a decision because he was told like either both of them will die or maybe we can possibly save one, which is the baby. And he was trying to get an heir. In a lot of other like episodes or whatever, the old Game of Thrones, it would have been some guy making that choice because, hey, guess what? I want a male heir. I don't give a crap about my wife. You kill her and give me the heir. But I actually think this guy like really felt bad that he had to make this decision and stuff. And I think he really truthfully loved his wife. And in the old Game of Thrones, you had kings or people that were in charge that would do things like they would make mistakes, but then not really own up to their mistakes very often. They just kept going and everything else. And like the same thing, I really do like this king so far because like he made that tough choice with his wife, but I think he really loved his wife. But in that scene at the very end with his daughter, when he's talking to his daughter about possibly being the heir and he ends up naming her the heir at the end of the episode, I really thought that was pretty cool that this king actually realized like, look, I've been ignoring her because I have been looking for the heir, which is normally a male if you have a male child. And like he pretty much at that moment was like, because technically he's a king now with a dead wife. He could get another lady and try to like make another heir. But instead of doing that, instead of being like disgraceful in a way, he decides to make his daughter the heir after talking to her and telling her like, look, I've been kind of ignoring you or not seeing you because I've been looking for this male heir. That's my bad. That's my mistake. Let me make it up to you. And we didn't see a lot of that in the original Game of Thrones. There was a lot of conniving and stabbing in the back and people not trusting nobody kind of thing. So it was kind of cool to see that in here. So, I mean, like, what do you think about that series of events? I mean, do you agree with what I'm saying or?
Yeah, but there will be that stuff is coming. I think they're leading up to that. I think they're just kind of setting up, you know, the table for more conniving and playing the Game of
Oh yeah.
Thrones, um, because it is going to lead, his decision that he made is going to lead to a war, eventually a Targaryen civil war. That's what the show is going to be about. So I think they're just planting little seeds. And other characters. I mean, you can see maybe the hand has like the was saying, like, oh, the hand has his own things that he wants to do. And of course, Prince Damon wants to, he wants to take it over. He wants to be king. So I think there is there will be all that backstabbing and whatnot. They're just telling you. I think they're just setting up, telling you who the characters or who will probably be ended up doing all the backstabbing and lying or whatnot.
Yeah, so like in the original Game of Thrones, we kind of had it different, right? You saw the Starks, and then like the king comes in, and and eventually in the episode, like you said earlier, Bran gets pushed off the tower. So you get to see the bad guys kind of like do their thing right off the bat, right off the start. The people you would consider good being like screwed over in the moment and all this stuff. In this first episode of this new show, it kind of mirrors it, but opposite to me, because you do have this king, like I said, that seems like to be a respectable guy. Like he's not a piece of trash. He does the right thing. And the guy who like is probably conniving or the backstabbing, like you saying, trying to get his way to the throne, which is his brother Daemon Targaryen. Like, he puts him in his place. This king, this good king, this guy that I think is a good actual person, like says, nah, bro, you getting out of here. You didn't even show respect to my wife and my dead child and everything else. So because of that, you can go back home. And he sends them home. So like I said, it's a little bit different. So like the people that you would assume would be, say, these like characters that aren't the greatest characters and all that kind of stuff as far as like morality goes. And this first episode of this version of Game of Thrones is the total opposite. So the good person actually sends the person that's probably immoral back home, tells him to get out of here, you're disrespectful, and everything else. So now we see that person, unlike the Starks who were trying to rally around Bran, now we see this guy have to go back to the Vale. He's getting his dragon. He's obviously pissed off because he thinks he was done wrong. So that is like kind of cool how these things are going through there and being a little bit of a different thing. Like there's some similarities, but then there's also like major differences as well.
Yeah, and I think another setup that they placed was the older. They made sure they showed the reaction of the older sister being passed over, because she couldn't be queen because it couldn't be a woman queen, to Viserys being king, and her reaction later on. I think they kind of focused on her, and her husband. And her husband was kind of he's a Valerian. He was kind of taking Prince Daemon's side, like he should be heir. So I think that's another setup of who could which side they're gonna take in this whole civil war, and what they could do as a reaction to him naming his heir.
Yeah, they definitely took and set up like what you see as obviously first episode. So like the king himself, he has some kind of lesion or something on his back. They're trying to work with the maester and stuff like that's trying to work with. And the maester is actually giving him like, well, for some other reason, this thing ain't getting healed right. And they were talking about basically burning it now was going to be the next step they took or whatever. So obviously there's something happening to the king to where he's not like completely 100% healthy. So whatever this is could cause him to possibly pass away or whatever, which is going to spark all this like stuff going on. It may not do it in the very next episode. Obviously, it's probably gonna be a few episodes down the road. This thing will probably keep making him weak, and then people will start putting their cards on the table. But I agree with you. So, like the king that we have now, Viserys, like he was chosen, but now he was up against another Targaryen, which was a woman. And it was going to be the first time a woman got to sit the throne, but she lost in that kind of voting situation that they were put in with this Grand Council that one king put in there. So. I found that interesting because, like you said, she's later on in the episode. She doesn't like the series decision to name his heir as his oldest daughter or whatnot. So she's obviously going to be involved at some point. Then you got Daemon, his brother's obviously involved as already. It ain't at some point. We already know he's got ambitions and stuff like that because he talks to the actual daughter like they seem to be really good friends, which is another kind of conflict that's going to come to a head, because like now somebody that he loved, or at least showed some emotion to and stuff, and gave a gift at the very beginning of the episode, now is going to be like one of his enemies, because well, like it or not, because he's going to have to go against her if he's trying to step up and be king. And then you have the king's daughter, like I've already said. So there's the three people we got in play right now without adding anyone else. The thing about it is, when some of these strifes happen and everything else, like when these things start to fall apart and becomes chaos, you'll have some people, like we saw in the Game of Thrones, like Rob Snark and them didn't really want, like I just said, I did it on the live show. It's not Snark, it's Stark. Rob Stark. Thank you. Rob Stark, and that never wanted to take control of the whole Seven Kingdoms. He just wanted to be king of the North. He just wanted the North to be left alone. Like, whatever, we don't want to fight you, but don't come to our lands either. And you may have things like, I think it was Rickon Stark that was actually there at the very end of the episode, which I was kind of excited to see. Stark being involved at least somewhere, that they're barely there. He's the very last guy who comes in, and like, I guess he's like, telling them that, like, hey, we'll honor your decision and everything else. Like, we'll honor her when she becomes queen and everything. But like, maybe because it's a young girl that takes the throne, when something happens to the king, that maybe, the Rickon Stark's like, yo, bro, we don't care about this no more. We don't think you're strong enough to take us over anymore. We want to be our own place. We don't want to be part of this kingdom. So you may have stuff like that happen down the road, which would be kind of cool, that if we see any of that stuff. And everything else. We did see the Baratheons represented actually by a couple people. We had like the Baratheons inside the tournament and stuff like that. And on top of that, we also had one of these Hightower or whatever, but we had this Dornish. A guy from Dorne basically that came in. He's Dornish, that comes in and wins this tournament and actually beats Prince Daemon in like a battle. Prince Daemon doing the normal show off thing, and then it almost cost him his life basically. So we're going to see like some of that stuff happening. I think on future episodes, they'll probably get in another battle again. I don't know who would win it, but we'll see from there.
Yeah, I think they made the point of, when all the families came and showed fealty to and bend the knee to the new heir. I think they made a point to show you like this family and that family, because they want you to know what role they may have in the future. Okay, this family is might be with this people or that people, and make sure you know all the families that are going to take part in this whole conflict that's coming.
Yeah, and like the Hand of the King, that gentleman, I didn't catch his name. I did take a couple of notes here, but I didn't catch his name.
He's a Hightower.
Okay, so he's a Hightower. He's the Hand of the King. I think he's using his daughter as ways. He's got a beautiful daughter that's part of this. It's like best friends with the next heir, it looks like, with the king's daughter. So his daughter, looks like he's using her to be friends with certain people, to go and talk to certain people and stuff like that. So we'll find out what's happening with everything else. What's up, Brandy? But so I think we are getting the buildup of like, okay, we got this house of cards set up. Everything looks nice right now. It looks beautiful. It's like, oh my God, everything's constructed. But we're already seeing some of the cards start to falter. Some of the cards we know are suspicious. Like, when is this going to give way? When is this going to give way? So I thought that was a pretty cool thing.
Definitely the Baratheon did not like bending the knee to a woman, because he was totally against having the woman as the ruler. So that's why that's all I was saying, that they chose to show you how each family lord would react to having a woman as the heir.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I didn't see. I'd have to go back and look, but like the Stark guy that came up, I didn't actually see him kneel. I just saw him talking and speaking. I want to go back and look at that, because that would be a very like a good thing to see. Like you said, the one Baratheon guy did kneel, but he did it like where he was obviously didn't want to.
He was reluctant.
He was reluctant to do it, and like I said, I didn't know if the way they filmed it, like it did go behind. Maybe the Stark guy was kneeling, but you couldn't tell because of his cloak or whatever. But it didn't look like he was while he was talking. It looked like he was just standing up there. So we'll find out. But one thing big that we do know throughout the entire history, we do have that Dornish guy that came up and actually beat the Prince Daemon in that joust. And then they had a fight afterwards that he actually beat Prince Daemon in, because Daemon was showboating, which always happens. Come on, man. Prince Oberyn. Never showboat, man. We learned our lesson in the first Game of Thrones in season 4, by God.
Well, that hasn't happened yet, so
Right. But
Obviously,
like
Prince Oberyn didn't learn from him.
yeah. Prince Oberyn did not learn lessons, obviously, throughout the history of the Targaryens and everything else. But with this being said, I did think it was interesting. We saw one of those there because they're one of the. I've got the flag. It's the orange flag just right over here, House Martell. They did that. They're one of the, if not, I think they're actually the only house that never bent the knee. They never bent the knee.
That is true.
Even to the Targaryens, they never actually bent their knee to the Targaryens. They never gave in. They brokered peace.
Yeah, through marriage.
You leave us
through marriage. They were folded into the realm.
Exactly. So like they said, we won't attack you or whatever. We're good. Just leave us alone, kind of thing. And the Targaryens actually let them survive after that because of the fact that like the Dornish ain't nobody to play with. And it's hard to attack them because they got this natural landscape that kind of helps protect them. So they're hard to get to. And even though you have dragons, like it was still kind of difficult thing. So they were just like, okay, cool, whatever. So like that's an interesting fact there that they're the one group that never bent the knee. So and that's been told throughout hundreds of years, ever since the Targaryens tried to like take over all the Seven Kingdoms. But yeah, man, like I really liked a lot of things. Like I was very interested and did start liking him, even though I know he's probably going to be the bad guy. Daemon, man, Prince Daemon, I thought was acted well. I thought the character was interesting. Like, what did you like? Some of these characters, like, what did you think about like Prince Daemon?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was pretty cool. I mean, he's hanging out with whorehouses. Okay, I'm saying with that, pretty hot chick, so it seems pretty cool to me, I mean, he may got ambitions, but I mean, who doesn't,
Yeah, so I'll just go through a couple of characters here, and then like you just kind of say like what you thought. Like the king, I already put like a lot of what are my thoughts about the king now, about him being respectful and stuff like that. Like, so what do you think about that character, that king?
Yeah, but yeah, he is. But Prince Daemon might be right. Maybe that's the weakness of him. The fact that others can kind of talk and plan and do stuff behind his back, and he may not notice because he just he's too respectful, and he's kind of like Ned Stark, kind of like too honorable to notice what the hell is actually going on. But obviously Ned was a lot stronger, and it's kind of they seem a little weaker than that. But yeah, that's what I think of him. At least for one episode of seeing him. Yeah,
you mentioned like Arya Stark. We'll go to the king's daughter now. So with her, I felt a little bit of Arya Stark. The first thing we see is her riding the dragon and having a good time, and she's not really caring about any of this. She's already kind of gave up. Like, she feels like her dad kind of disrespects her because she's a girl. So she's just going through and doing her own thing and all this stuff. She wants to have fun and everything. Reminds me a little bit of like the Arya character. With her, but I felt like we learned something about her, but not enough. You know what I'm saying? Like there was just still a lot of mystery behind her. Like, what does she really think about all this? Because she kind of got this being the heir thrust upon her and everything. So we didn't get to see like any kind of dialogue afterwards of like what she may think about this turn of events and everything else. Does she even want to do this? I know she's happy that her dad's noticing her now and everything else. That's going to be an obvious take. But beyond that, like, does she really actually want this overall and stuff is what I'm going to probably be wanting to find out in the next episode or two.
Well, obviously it showed that even talking with her friend that she didn't really want to change her princess. She liked just being the princess, not really having the responsibility of being the heir, because she always, because obviously Prince Daemon was the heir until, he was going to have a boy, and she just kind of felt like to the side a little bit, but she was okay with that. She didn't really want to take over. But now that I think after the speech her father gave her, now I think she's really going to embrace that position, really think of it, this is my, duty to be queen.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. She was doing the whole like laying down her friend's lap and they were having that discussion. She was like, I'm happy where I am now, that kind of thing before all this happened. And now she's had this thrust upon her by her father, who notices her now. Like I think that's like a big deal, right? That's always been a big deal in the Game of Thrones. It's like having your father actually care for you and everything else. Like a lot of we have those situations throughout all the Game of Thrones. I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people like the Starks, for instance, because like in the Game of Thrones version, now these Starks people are not going to be the same Starks that we grew to possibly love or like or whatever or respect in the original Game of Thrones. These are a totally different group of Starks. Like they could be buttholes for all we know, right? It's until we actually meet their characters and who's there and everything else surrounding them. But like in the original Game of Thrones, the Starks were like the one dad that actually cared for all of his kids, even his bastards, and he treated them with respect and all this stuff. Like he was one of the true fathers out there that really cared. Almost every other dad in Game of Thrones didn't give two shits about any of their kids, male or female. It didn't matter. They didn't care about them. And then we have one person, Cersei, who so-called loved their kids so much that she made all these choices. But I'm here to argue that she actually didn't ever care about her kids. She was using them to try to get things for herself. She thought and said she did them for her kids. And maybe she even felt like she was doing them for her kids or whatever to keep them safe or to give them power. But like overall, we all know towards the, the seasons of Game of Thrones as it went, she made decisions that we know wasn't for her kids overall. So like we learned those things. Like I'm actually being respectful for the original Game of Thrones now that I'm thinking about it, because we got Brandy up in here watching the show and we're actually doing a watch along of the old original Game of Thrones to get her ready for this show. But she was able to watch the episode because like, this obviously doesn't have anything to pertain with what we watched first time in the Game of Thrones. But I was really happy with this.
Actually, it's somewhat it does, because he does make a reference to when the king is giving that speech to her. He does reference Song of Fire and Ice, which is talking about that Aegon the Conqueror, he came over to Westeros and tried to conquer it because he's trying to bring everybody together, because he had a vision that the long night is going to come, that the winter is coming, that the Night King and all the White Walkers were going to someday descend upon Westeros and wipe out everybody. So he did it so he can get all mankind to fight against that. So that was a reference that you would know.
No, yeah, you're right.
Game of Thrones to know what he's talking about.
They say that Song of Fire and Ice, they actually, like you said, they mention basically that long winter and everything. Is kind of funny because this is 200 years before it happens. And he's still trying to pass that along and still kind of trying to live by that, which is actually pretty cool. That is that one connection. But besides that, as far as characters or people, they don't even know. This is 200 years. Nobody lives that long. So like nobody who is alive in the original Game of Thrones is even close to being alive during this time that we're watching this, which is pretty interesting. It's pretty different to see something go back that far in the same kind of world. So like, but no, overall, first episode, really highly enjoyed it. Really great for a first episode. Like it's one of those, a lot of people tell you there's that 3 rule where it's like, give it 3 episodes to see if it catches your attention and keeps you wanting to go. I feel like this first episode, I love Game of Thrones, so like it's a little bit of a biased opinion, but I do truly feel that like even if you're didn't watch the original Game of Thrones and you just happen to watch this first episode of the House of Dragons, that you might really like it and really get interested in it on the very first episode. A lot of shows can't do that. A lot of shows can't get you the hooks in you on that first couple of episodes and everything else. It actually takes further down the line, maybe longer in the season, before it becomes, oh shit, this is really good. This, on the other hand, I think this was a great episode to start out any kind of show for. With it had some of the action, it has like the callback, like you said, it had like just different things and different things that were set up, but they did them in interesting ways. They had the brutality, man, in this world, in the Game of Thrones. It's brutal. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no jokes about any of this. It's brutal, and we saw the brutal with like the birth scene in this thing, the brutal during the tournament whenever everybody kind of lost control for a second, pissed off, and gets into like a Royal Rumble fight style. We got to see the brutality during that period of time too, in that part of the show. So I do think they held they kind of kept their what do you want to call it, the feel of Game of Thrones going. Like I said, if I didn't know any better, I would have said the same people were running this show that ran the original Game of Thrones. You can't say that all the time when you have different creators. I know this is different creators doing this show. They might have some people that they're kind of talking to and getting helped out as far as this, like you said, the cinematography stuff they learned from the Game of Thrones, kind of bringing it over to help this out. But like, yeah, Dude, really, I felt like I was watching Game of Thrones, and like I said, I wouldn't have known different people was doing it if I just didn't know that piece of information.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think it's just even though it's a prequel, it's a continuation of what they did in Game of Thrones, getting you sucked into the world and sucked into into the characters. Pretty much, and with the music, even they played some of the Game of Thrones music. It wasn't totally like the original. They kind of tweaked it a little bit.
I did like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, yeah, with the Targaryen, like Daenerys's music that she would always come into. They tweaked it a little bit, and then the original, theme song of Game of Thrones they played at the end, but it was a little different, So yeah, they still had a lot of new music, which gave you the feel of the original Game of Thrones, and like I said, just a continuation of the greatness that was.
Okay, so for the few people in the chat and for the people that watch this afterwards, I'm going to throw a couple of questions out here right now. And this is something we'll probably do for like each episode because me and Caleb are planning, unless something happens in our lives that stops us from being able to. We are going to try to do one of these episodes after every episode of this new season of the House of Dragons. And 2 questions I'm going to throw out. And we'll start with the first one. Your favorite scene of this episode. I'll go ahead and start with mine, and then you can answer afterwards. So my favorite scene of this episode, and there was a couple of good scenes, actually, like a handful of really good scenes, I think, in this very first episode, which is very telling. When, sometimes you'll watch episodes like one really cool scene, but it made it worth it. This one had like multiple cool scenes to me, but one of the cooler scenes in this episode that I really liked was just that I liked and had fun with was the battle royal scene. Basically, the speed jousting and into the battle royal scene where they're kind of going at each other, reminding us the brutality of the Game of Thrones. There's no reason to have this scene in the show unless you're just trying to prove, like, hey guys, we're wanting you to know we're not going to not be brutal in this show. We're still going to be Game of Thrones. When you have the scene of the one guy getting dragged off and they left and half his face falls off.
Well, even more than that, I mean, they cut dude's dick off. They cut dude's dick
off. They did. Yeah, they reminded us that dicks do get cut off in these shows. They did remind us, but that wasn't one of my. But my favorite scene is like that scene where they grabbing him off the the tournament grounds. They're pulling him off the tournament grounds, and just like you could tell he's cut bad and everything. But when they move his body, like just part of his cheek just falls off into the mud. And I'm like, okay, Game of Thrones. That's why that particular scene was my favorite in this. Like this thing had dragons in it, multiple dragons, which I think the Daemon Targaryen dragon looked the coolest shit, to be honest with you. I like that red and black color. But like
his armor looked cool as shit. His helmet is
that red and black thing, maybe, looking like Kylo Ren out there, but with white hair. You know what I'm saying? Like, but my thing is, I know there's dragons and stuff in there, and people like dragons, but I just love that scene for this very first episode because it did remind me this is Game of Thrones. Hold on to your seatbelts. That one particular scene did. But like, what is your? Because there's one question that's going to follow this. What is your favorite scene of this episode?
My favorite scene, probably the whole. I think I like the way they switch back and forth, going from the burden scene to the battle scene, and kind of those two events of like him winning victory and the baby getting born, kind of two this was the heir and this was the new heir, even though that heir was only here for a day, like he said. That going back and forth was that whole sequence really cool.
Yeah, actually, that is pretty interesting. I didn't think about it until you just said something, but like, he raises his arms in victory. The baby's actually being born, and it's alive at first. And then when he gets hit in the back by the guy he thought he did defeated, then the baby dies. Like, so it was kind of mirroring each other. Like they both were in a happy moment at that moment, but then all of a sudden everything kind of went to a crash and halt. So that's actually kind of interesting when you look at it. But with the favorite scene, this is going to sound sort of like the same question, but it's not, because, and I'm doing this on purpose, because we have our favorite scenes, but not all the time are they the most important scenes. So with that being said, Caleb, what do you feel like was the most important scene for the series going forward from season 1? So what scene tonight do you think that people are going to come back to to be like, you know how like when we watched the Game of Thrones the first time, you'd always kind of go back to a season or episode beforehand because it's like, wait 1 second, that person just said this, but didn't this one person say this? And you would go back and try to find it to make sure you were right, like that they said a certain thing, so you can try to put puzzles together or whatnot and some of this stuff, like find out what may be happening. So what do you feel like people will actually go back to this first episode for as something that's very important that they need to rewatch?
Like I said, the way that everybody, each lord showed fealty. I think if you go back and pay attention to how each person reacted, I think you can tell who wanted her to be queen, who didn't want to be queen, how everybody reacted to that, and that's going forward. And if you just forget about the first episode and you have to go back and watch it, I think you can tell, that's why this person made that decision and this person made this decision, just by the reactions of that naming his heir.
I'm going to say what I feel like, and that's a pretty good one. I actually think you're right. That is a pretty important thing in this episode. To me, the most important thing in this episode that reminded me that this is the Game of Thrones, beyond that like brutality part, but the part that reminded me about the chess moves that were made in the Game of Thrones when it comes to the Game of Thrones, right? You either play to win or you die kind of thing here, is the scene where you see the hand talking to his daughter, and he sends his daughter to the king to make him happy. Because I thought that was just a girl that was friends with the king's daughter, didn't know exactly any kind of relationship. They did kind of keep it secret. She just walked around with her and talked to her, chummed her up a lot. And it looks like they're best friends, or at least seem to be best friends. And at that moment of that scene where the hand is talking to what we find out is his daughter to go and actually be with the king in his time of need. And like I said, he's like, go make him happy. Like, and nothing happens because that king's actually respectful, right? Like, so there is no like, oh, go make him happy, like in a sexual way or any of that. It was to go be with him, go like talk to him, go spend time with him, and go find out some information if you can, basically, is what I kind of deemed from it. And I at that moment, I remembered this is a show with a lot of chess plays and a lot of chess moves being made. And there goes that. So in the first episode, they reminded me of the brutality. Then they ended up reminding me of the chess, the moves made behind people's backs and stuff to get themselves in certain ways. That hand is trying to secure his way by using his daughter to go and do that. And I think that's a very important part of this episode is when we find that out. Oh, it's great. Look at this. This queen's got a great friend. Turns out maybe she's not the friend she thinks she is.
Yeah.
That's what I think. So with that being said, like I said, guys, if you was in the chat now, like if you wanted to answer those questions, what was your favorite scene or what scene you thought was the most important, that's something we'll probably be asking every week. So if you want to play a part in that, you can jump on in there, do that next week and everything. We're almost done with this show. And like I said, if you watch this on the rewatch or after we go live and you're watching it, leave the comments down in the section, or maybe you were in the chat tonight and you didn't think of anything, or you got thrown out there and you couldn't think, well, man, I can't really make up my mind. But if, like, let's say tomorrow you remember, oh, my favorite scene, or this is what I think is the most important scene, throw it down in the comments below. Please like and subscribe to the channel and everything. Like I said, we'll be here every week after the House of Dragons has finished, around an hour, according on to work schedule, maybe 2 hours after the show. We will be doing the show here and talking to you guys about hopefully what we think's probably the second greatest show of all time. Because I still, even with the people that got mad with the last two seasons, I still think Game of Thrones is the greatest show.
I mean, it's still my favorite. It might not be the best, but it's still my favorite.
Yep. So yeah, this is a great time to get into the story, get into the lore. And like said earlier, and I say all the time, man, you guys are great, awesome. Everybody, thanks for the support that you do just by watching the show and helping out any way that you can. And with that being said, love you guys. Until next time, peace.